Thank you very much. Um, I'm not accustomed to holding my bat in my hand for very long when I was batting for the West Indies. And I've been there for like a few hours. Well, I think we'd be about 200 for one. That's not a score I'm accustomed going into bat, but we're here. But what is there not to like about being in St. Lucia? I've been coming to St. Lucia for many, many years. And let me tell you, it's only 7 months ago that I boarded a boat and decided to go up on the coastline and actually confronted the pitons for the first time. It was a wonderful trip. I remember just going into the little coves and seeing the different fishing villages, all the resorts, not a lot of resorts. And one thing I gathered from my trip is that St. Lucia still belongs to St. Lucia. And we can't say the same for a lot of other Caribbean islands. Marigo, I got off the boat at the bottom of, I think, just around Sugar Beach. There was a carnival going on at the time. And I went to Fondo, which I had a wonderful stay there for a few hours before boarding my flight and heading out of St. Lucia. But you have a lot of the natural trails, you have waterfalls, you have the world-renowned Sulphur Springs in Soufrière. When you get to Castries, you got all the different places on this point, Pigeon Point, which I've been on many times for Jazz Festival. Gros Islet on a Friday night is one of my best spots. And of course, Beauséjour, which is the home of a couple hundreds that I've made in my career. And in terms of strike rate, I think that that cricket ground, if I'm scoring 100 every 2 innings, I'd love to play there more often than not. But you know, when I get to 200, what happens? I start thinking very big. And if you remember, my first 100 was scored in Australia, in Sydney Cricket Ground. And today I have a 21-year-old daughter running around the place called Sydney, thanking me very much that I did not make my first 100 when I made my debut in Lahore, Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know, I'm almost sure that you know the name Francis Mindu Philip. Do you know that name? All right. Born a few months after my dad in August of 1927. My dad was born in May of 1927. And Mindu learned his cricket at the Aloysius Roman Catholic School. His dad was actually a carpenter, and he didn't do that trade for very long because he was given a job as a handyman at the Victoria Park cricket stadium, which was actually the only first-class stadium that they had for cricket in St. Lucia back in those days. It also serves other purposes for athletics, for rugby, for football, and even for a lot of cultural shows. But getting back to Mindu, he had a friend called Stanley who said that Mindu was a destroyer of all types of bowling. He was one of the best all-rounders, and he was reputed as one of the best all-rounders in the Caribbean who actually never got a looking for the West Indies cricket team. His only actual international experience was against Australia playing for the Windward Islands in 1955. Mindu, on his retirement, followed in his father's footsteps, and he became the main curator at Victoria Park. He was also a referee. He was the president of the Referee Association. He was the president of Marchand Football Association. He was a national selector and a national hero. In 1971, I think he was awarded the British Empire Award as well. And you're wondering how much I know about this guy if I've ever met him. I actually met Mr. Philip. And when I met him, Victoria Park was not Victoria Park. It was the Mindu Philip Park, and quite rightly so. He said to me, I remember very vividly, I was only 18 years old, and I came here to play for the West Indies under 23 against Pakistan as the captain. We were playing against Imran Khan and that great team. And he said to me, young man, I understand you're the captain. I said, yes. He said, if you win the toss, bat first. This pitch is a batting paradise. Well, I lost the toss, and Pakistan batted for 2 days. And I'm not making any excuses for my 15 runs in both innings, but the pitch crumbled and the great Abdul Qadir, leg spinner from Pakistan, picked up 9 wickets. But it was actually the first time I also got to see a fellow West Indian play called Keith Atherton. And he scored 124 for us against Pakistan, even in a losing effort. And I looked at Jimmy Adams, who was my teammate and someone who I grew up through the ranks with, and I said, Jimmy, this guy's in a different class to us, and he agreed. Well, another very important thing to understand in 1988 when I made my first trip to St. Lucia was that even from Mr. Mindu Phillips' playing days to then, St. Lucia was still looking for its first international cricketer. St. Vincent had the likes of Mike Finley, Alfonso Roberts, Winston Davis. Dominica had the Shillingford. They also had Norbert Phillip. But St. Lucia had no one. And it was only until 2004 when the West Indies was having a disastrous tour of England. I was captain of that team and a very disenchanted individual at the time. And we picked a one-day team to represent us in the Tri-Nation Cup. And the name Darren Sammy popped up, and I had no clue who Darren Sammy was. Playing for the West Indies, I didn't have the opportunity to play much first-class cricket. So Darren Sammy was actually forced on me. He actually didn't make a difference because we continued losing. The fact of the matter is, the excuse that he had is that he didn't get picked for any of the matches. We lost that tournament and we went into the Champions Trophy a few weeks later. And again, I sat with the selectors and it was a very short tournament. It was groups of 3, 4 groups of 3. If you lose, you're virtually out of the tournament. And the way we went about picking that team was we picked the 11 players that we felt that could carry us through the tournament, or we pack our bags and go home. And then we pick another 2 or 3 reserves. And we picked the 11, and Darren Sammy was not in the 11. And we picked the 3 reserves, and he was not in the 3 reserves. And I stood up and I said to the selectors, if I can say a few things. Back in those days, you got to remember, I was on the end of my stint as a captain. They were just ready to kick me out. It was just a matter of time. And I said to them that I was in total agreement with the 11 that you picked to play, but I'd like a little change around in the reserve staff. And they said, why? I said, well, I feel that the guys that you've picked, there's a little bit of a negative energy if they are not playing. They tend to not carry the right demeanor that you want in the dressing room. And they said, well, who would you rather play? I'd say I'd rather pick Sylvester Joseph and Darren Sammy. Well, knowing that they weren't going to play in the tournament, the selectors agreed, and we walked into the tournament with Darren Sammy, Sylvester Joseph, and the remainder of players. What I found about Darren Sammy a few weeks earlier when I met him for the first time in the West Indies team is that I'd never seen anyone so enthusiastic about playing for West Indies. He reminded me of the days when I first started and I had to share a dressing room with Sir Vivian Richards, Gordon Greenwich, Desmond Haynes. I mean, I was burning with fire just to be in that atmosphere, and Darren Sammy reminded me of that. I remember one of the matches that we were playing in, and one of the bowlers, even before he signaled for a towel or water, Darren Sammy was on the boundary line with it. And that is the sort of individual that you'd want around any dressing room. And we went on and we won that tournament. And I looked at Darren and I said, you know what? You're definitely going to be a part of any West Indies team that I'm picking in the future. Darren Sammy didn't just go on to be a part of any West Indies team that I picked in the future. He went on to become captain. And maybe one of the most successful captains that we've had in the last 30 years of West Indies cricket. 2 World Cup wins, and I'm very friendly with some of the present selectors, and they still to answer me, how could a guy win a World Cup and can't see the team the next time that they made the field? That is almost impossible to understand. Today, like many years ago, when you renamed Victoria Park, Mendu Phillip Park. I think that you have done yourself a great service by changing Bezaju to Darren Sammy's cricket ground. I think it's a wonderful bestowment to maybe one of your greatest sportsmen that you've had thus far. St. Lucia don't only just have one international cricketers, you have more. Johnson Charles and a couple others that I'm sure that's going to not just play for West Indies in the near future, but play for a very, very long time. I think one thing I must also say is that I know that you would want to hear a little bit about my career, a little bit about something that I've done or some sort of experience. And I was just mulling over in my head, what could I put in a package that feels that you can give you the best and worst of me, because I'm almost sure that on many occasions that I've had you feeling very proud, and then on many occasions I've had you feeling very disappointing. And I believe that there was one watershed moment in my career, and I think it's 1998, 1999, where during a 5-month period I felt most humiliated, and by the end of that 5 months, maybe the happiest cricketer around. I don't know if you remember, in late 1998, we were about to tour South Africa. And we were held up in a hotel in London with a pay dispute with the West Indies Cricket Board. And we were washing our laundry right in front of the harshest journalists in the world, in England. And they were quite happy to sort of lap up everything that we were doing right in front of their doorstep. And it was not a very proud moment for me or for any West Indian at the time, but it was something that we felt that we needed to do, and we felt very strongly about it. And I don't believe that it's something that we should go into right at this moment. But I remember one of those nights that we were stuck at the hotel, I got a letter underneath my door from the late Nelson Mandela. And he said in his letter that all of South Africa was looking forward to seeing the world champions at play in South Africa. Could you please consider? Well, we immediately packed our bags, forgot the argument that we had with the West Indies Cricket Board, and we headed down to South Africa to fulfill Mr. Mandela's dream. Whilst in South Africa, though, cricket was very much secondary on the guys' mind at the time, and we were beaten 5-0 in the test series, and we were beaten 6-1 in the one-day series. Humiliating defeat. And as captain, of course, I felt the brunt of it. I remember coming back to the West Indies and not expecting to be captain. I expected to be sacked because of all the tumultuous times that we had, the results that we had. But I don't know if the first test match being in Trinidad and Tobago against Australia played a part. Because in 1992-93, I remember Anderson Cummins got dropped from the West Indies team when we were playing South Africa for the first time in Barbados. And we played to an empty stadium. So maybe the West Indies Cricket Board felt, well, you know what? They're playing against Australia. Let's put him on probation for 2 test matches, and then we'll get rid of him. Well, in the first test match in Trinidad, in the 4th innings, we got bowled out for 51. So that's 6 on a trot, and I have 1 test match left as a captain. And the media made sure and mentioned it. They wanted to know if I was going to play, if I get sacked as captain, what am I going to do with my career? And playing for the West Indies was the number one thing that I've always wanted to do, and I was always going to play. We arrived in Jamaica for the 2nd test match, and I was booed walking on to take the toss with Steve Waugh. He was surprised, the Australian captain. And he won the toss, and Australia decided to bat. And I sat in the dressing room, and I started thinking, the captain of any cricket team walks about 5 yards in front of the players before they all enter the field. And there's the George Headley stand. I don't know if you know Sabina Park. There's this big George Headley stand behind me. And I felt that, if I walk 5 yards in front of this team, I can get a red stripe bottle in my head. Well, I felt, I got to brave it. And I took for the field. As I entered the field, the great Courtney Walsh, one of my teammates, actually the guy who I replaced as captain, put his hand around my shoulder and the whole of Sabina Park went quiet. And that was maybe the most magnanimous thing that anybody have ever done for me. Australia went on that day and they made 275 around there. And we had about 45 minutes to bat in the evening. And by the end of the 45 minutes, the West Indies were 36 for 4. 51 in our last innings all out, 36 for 4 already in Jamaica. I was not out on about 2 or 3, and I went to my room, and one of my Jamaican friends brought some jerk chicken and jerk pork, and he sat there, and he said, you know what, you guys are going to win this test match. I wanted to know how huge this spliff he smoked was, because no way a team that made 51, 36 for 4, I'm thinking, could we save the follow-on? Well, the next morning, we got to the cricket ground, and the Australians were warming up, we were warming up, and on the field was the practice facility. And I was, as I said, I was not out, and I put my pads on, and I went to the nets, and the Australians was in the nets. And I said to Steve, well, can I have a net? I'm going to bat in half an hour. He said, you're going to have the net when we finish. I said, we are batting now, so why can't I have it now? He said, well, we're going to be batting soon. I said, okay, no problem. Since you know you're going to be batting soon, not a problem at all. And I took my bat and my pads, and I went on the side on the grass, and I had a knock-up. And my determination just grew. And from 36 for 4, myself and Jimmy Adams took it to 375 for 4 in the same day. I looked at Steve-O when I was walking off the field at the end of the second, and I said, it looks like you're still batting. But we went on to win that test match, and of course the president of the West Indies Cricket Board at the time came to me and he said, you know, how long do you want to captain for? We went on to Barbados, and I don't know if you guys remember, I think the Wisden said it's maybe one of the greatest test matches that I ever played. I'm not going to go through the whole match, but I'm going to go through the fact that when I saw Courtney Walsh, the last batsman, walking down the stairs, and we had 6 runs to make, I was batting in the middle, and I was in total panic. Because Courtney Walsh cannot bat. I met Courtney Walsh halfway. I said to Courtney, he said, don't tell me anything. I'm not getting out, so as long as I'm not getting out, you don't get out, we're going to win this match. And Courtney Walsh had 4 balls to face in that over that he walked in. And there was a ball, if you go back and look on YouTube, there's a ball that he trapped behind his back at his ankle that was going to ricochet into middle and leg stump. I don't know how he did it. He doesn't even know how he did it. Courtney Walsh survived, and we won maybe the most amazing test match ever played in the Caribbean. We left Barbados 2-1 in the series, and we went to Antigua only looking for a draw so we can actually regain the Sir Frank Worrell Trophy. Well, as you know, I have this up and down relationship with West Indian fans, and I scored 180 balls, and we lost the test match, and I was blamed for losing the test match for scoring 100 too quickly. I've never heard that one before, but Australia won the test match, and the series was drawn 2-2. And they retained the Sir Frank Worrell Trophy, but it was definitely a 5-month period of maybe my lowest in my career, and then to be at the highest point, playing in a series that I would never ever forget. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pretty much wonderful evening. I think, I know it's been a very long one, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. I just want to say a very, very big thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Chastanet for having me this evening, and to inviting me amongst all your distinguished guests to actually say a few words. And I was very nervous about it, but I felt that it's something that I had to do. I couldn't get out of it. Rendra, thank you for setting me up. I also want you guys to know that outside of cricket, I've gained a very, very close friend from St. Lucia, and his name is Earl Ball Hug Jean. I just want to say to Earl, we have adopted him in Trinidad. I hope you guys know that, and I just gave him a visa to come across for a few days, and we're going to have him back. But ladies and gentlemen, it's been a wonderful evening. I want to thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Wow, what a Caribbean man.